Let me begin by just expressing my gratitude to the organizers of this international conference, which is the main highlight of the AVSI 50th anniversary celebrations. I want to salute the AVSI fraternity on this occasion, congratulate you for the amazing work that you do across the world, and congratulate you for the proud record of the outreach work that you have done in many countries, including in my own country. Your work has benefited millions of people. And so today we truly celebrate you and wish you another amazing number of years. It's been said by the other speakers that a measure of success will be delivering on your mandate and the world not needing you anymore. And I think, support that. But for the period that you're going to be of service to humanity, I'd just like to wish you, all the best. I have listened to all the speakers that opened our session this morning, and I think that we've had some amazing insight into how they feel into the work that they have done. His Excellency the Foreign Minister's point of support to the continent was very well taken. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have very many friends amongst you, and I'd like to just thank Khalid Malik for all the support that he has given to ensure that I was able to participate and to share with you my views. And I think that the theme that you've chosen is completely and totally pertinent. Comes at a time when, and you've all talked about the different challenges that and crises that we are facing as a global community. And within that broad theme of Beyond Development, I was requested to speak on the lessons learned and future perspectives in development cooperation. And I thought that just before I actually delved into that, and I know many of you have spoken to it already, it would be nice to just refer to, how we see development. And I think it's been defined as a country as processes through which a country increases its capacity to meet its citizens' basic human needs and raise their standard of living. Development cooperation, on the other hand, is the effort, and in many cases, it's global and regional effort to assist nation states, to assist communities, to assist civil society to develop and be able to meet the basic needs of societies across the world, and to also raise their standards of living. And so if we understand development cooperation that way, then we can also say that its beginning was with the Marshall Plan. And I think that all of you understand what the Marshall Plan was. I think it was the most successful development cooperation project that the world had ever seen. And to date, it remains the most successful one because it delivered on its mandate. And it was designed to help Western European countries recover from the devastation of the Second World War and get back on a trajectory of reconstruction and economic growth. It did that very, very well. And we actually, all of us, I think, hope that as we move forward, we'll be able to have development plans, development initiatives that will be able to meet their mandate as successfully as the Marshall Plan did. Soon after the recovery, of course, the European countries and others as well from Asia and other parts of the world, including Australia and New Zealand, joined the United States in the practice of development cooperation in support of other countries, including countries in the Southern Hemisphere. And this was done through the development assistance committees of the OECD. Now, if we want to appreciate better the lessons that we've learned from development cooperation, I think it's really important to briefly glance at its history in this regard. And since the Marshall Plan itself, the architecture, the practice, the modalities of development cooperation has mutated, and several strands are currently discernible. In the 60s, the prevailing view was that developing countries needed capital and technological transfers, and therefore cooperation was really focused on GNP growth as a key objective. Consequently, most of the official development assistance was provided as project aid. which mainly targeted infrastructure projects. It became clear, obviously, soon after that, that the GNP-oriented strategy was not delivering the anticipated results, and a new one called Integrated Rural Development Strategy, and I know Khalid knows all this, was adopted. And it entailed a move from project aid to larger program assistance, which included cross-cutting activities, sometimes involving many sectors of economies. And all of them were intended to address the root causes of rural poverty. This did not succeed as well as it should have, and it gave way to the neoliberal strategy, then popularly known as the structural adjustment programs, which were then developed in the early 80s. It emphasized liberalization, opening up of markets of developing countries in essence. And this was intended to encourage trade and, of course, encourage development, create jobs, and do all that international trade is expected to deliver. Unfortunately, even this did not work as well as it should have. It included the retrenchment of public servants, privatization of public services, led to mass unemployment, high cost of living, rise in the number of people living below the poverty line, increasing poverty in effect. As a result, it wasn't as helpful as it was intended. And so we went to the Washington Consensus, and you know what that entailed. It also was not as successful as it was supposed to be, although it provided guidance on a number of sectors. Now, at the point that we're talking, there's a new economic thinking, and it's called the Cornwall Consensus. This is emerging as a replacement of the Washington Consensus. I will not go into the details of that. But let me say that for me, the lessons, that the failure of Project 8, the integrated rural development, structural adjustment programs, the prevailing neoliberal paradigm, I'll have very many lessons on development cooperation. I will just mention a few, and I'll go through them very quickly because of the time constraints that we are faced with. First, instead of sectoral approaches, cooperation strategies for development should be deployed at the national level. This is because institutions are shaped at this stage and affect synergies and trade-offs between policies. Secondly, there is no one-size-fits-all. And so that approach is faulty. And development cooperation strategies must in the main be customized, and they must reflect the realities that are unique to each of our countries. Third, such strategies must be formulated using a participatory approach involving local actors, as opposed to imposing conditionalities and restrictions, or even policy agendas that have been conceived in boardrooms. This will not only help policymakers capture real priorities, but also enhance the ownership of such programs, of such initiatives. Four, it's more helpful to teach a man, and this has been said before, how to fish rather than provide him with the fish. This means development cooperation should aim at building and strengthening local capacities and address national priorities. The shoe wearer knows where it pinches. And so if you actually went to a village in any part of the world, in fact, not just in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and you ask the villagers what their priorities were, they'll tell you. They would also tell you what they thought, where they thought they needed help, and what they feel they could do on their own without much help from elsewhere. And so I think it's best to always ensure that there is that local content, and the local content must be, I think, at least 60% of the content of any program that is prepared. Five, there is a need to rethink some of the neoliberal prescriptions for economic development in favor of a more people-centered approach to economic development. And I think speakers that spoke before me have addressed that as well, that it has to be people-centered, it has to be human-centered, it must have equity, and it must address the poverty in the main. Six, per capita GNP is not a good measure for development. Research has demonstrated that higher levels of per capita income do not necessarily mean lower levels of poverty or less inequity or less inequality. Additional measures that accurately capture people's objective and subjective needs, including productivity, economic transformation, and so on are actually needed. 7, the field of development cooperation has evolved with time. New actors ranging from individuals, the private sector, civil society, and the emerging markets have entered this field. This underscores the need for global reorganization of sectors, of whole sectors, to embrace these new actors and coordinate activities for maximum efficiency, for maximum effectiveness. And finally, the modalities of financing development cooperation have also changed. This underlines the need to reshape the international development finance landscape to include new and emerging financial institutions and funding modalities. What do I think is the future perspective? Moving into the future, one of the critical steps that we must take to enhance the efficacy of development cooperation is to strengthen multilateralism. And I'll just quote what Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently said, and I quote, "Strengthening multilateralism is not a choice, it is a necessity." As we all appreciate our shared pursuit of global public goods, in which we all have a stake, such as, and they have also been named before me, environmental sustainability, migration, both legal and illegal, security, including the perennial wars that we face on the continent, as well as the new wars that have emerged, including the war in Ukraine, and increasingly globalized trade and financial flows, underscore the urgency of strengthening multilateral cooperation. In fact,
progressivamente. Grazie, scusi.
In fact, the confluence of global challenges that we're facing today, including the threat of widespread food and energy, pandemics, insecurity, the looming crisis of development financing and sovereign debt, the surge in inflation, the prevailing climate and geopolitical crisis, as well as the high risk of a global recession, can only be effectively tackled through stronger global cooperation. And finally, let me just say this, that as we focus on the future, a more integrated and aligned development cooperation strategy stands a better chance of success than the fragmented approaches that have characterized this field for a long time. The future of prosperity for all that we want can only be achieved of developing countries and developed countries together. The MDGs and its successor, the SDGs, reflect this understanding, represent the best way forward, and despite the weaknesses of the MDGs, which included the lack of monitoring and evaluation frameworks, they recorded huge successes. It can reasonably therefore be expected, ladies and gentlemen, that the SDGs, which benefit from lessons learned from the MDGs, will perform even better and at a much higher scale. In conclusion, it's my view that as a universal call to action that seeks to balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability, to end poverty, hunger, discrimination, to prioritize progress for the most disadvantaged, and to ensure women empowerment, the SDGs entail a far more focused and holistic approach than any other in the history of development cooperation. The world has massive resources. If they were channeled towards strengthening the SDGs framework, the world would well be on the way to tackle the goal of development that has eluded many countries for many decades. Let me end by wishing AVSI happy 50th anniversary, and may your next 50 be even more promising. Thank you very, very much.